who was the former president of the European Parliament, and we would be very glad to listen to his welcoming words. Pat, you have the floor.
Thank you, Anastasia. Dobry den, dobro ranku. Greetings from Dublin to everyone, and in particular, of course, to all those of you in Ukraine. My remarks this morning will consist of three things: some introductory comments, sharing with you an emerging vision for the future of construction in Europe, and some concluding remarks about opportunities for Ukraine. In terms of introduction, I'm really pleased to join you this morning, and thank you for the invitation. As a regular visitor to Ukraine, including during the war, it is always a pleasure for me to join any group of people committed to assisting your special country and its people at this very difficult time in your history. As you know, unhappily, Russia today currently occupies about 1/6 of Ukraine's sovereign territory. Millions of your fellow Ukrainian citizens have been displaced internally and externally. Civilian infrastructure and homes are criminally bombarded on a regular basis. Your armed forces and their families and thousands of civilians are paying a shocking price through death and injury. As a result of the war, your country has lost over a third of its pre-war gross domestic product. Ukraine needs and deserves all the help it can get. Peace, which is highly desirable, remains elusive precisely because the conditions for an acceptable, sustainable, stable, and just peace are not at hand. The reconstruction needs of Ukraine are and will be diverse, spanning the infrastructural, industrial, commercial, and residential sectors. The scale of the devastation and damage, as you know, varies by region within Ukraine, with the occupied territories exhibiting the consequences of Russia's scorched earth war machine that has reduced whole cities to piles of rubble in Mariupol, Bakhmut, and Avdiivka most recently. We have seen Putin's Potemkin village of a newly and badly constructed set of apartments in Mariupol, readied quickly to give him a photo opportunity last year. I've read subsequent reports of numbers of substandard but expensive renovations in Mariupol, carried out there by what one might describe as well-connected cowboy builders. This superficial approach is a nightmare to be avoided. Many Ukrainians have been forced to flee their homes, especially in the east, with vast territory so densely mined that any early return seems unviable. All this places a great responsibility on the shoulders of planners at national, regional, and municipal level to get things right for what will be a demanding, unique, and historic scale of reconstruction. External advice and assistance can and will help, but it cannot and should not seek to replace or displace Ukrainian decision-making autonomy. You Ukrainians are fighting and dying to protect your freedom and ours, and this includes your freedom to choose your own pathway to the future. What we're discussing today as regards sustainable reconstruction and green finance can make an important contribution in helping to make the best available choices. Another significant plus would be an insistence on high levels of openness and transparency when you specify and award future construction contracts, and by this means to confront and mitigate against any risks of corruption. I should add that during my most recent visit to Kiev earlier this year, I had the pleasure to meet several senior diplomats who shared with me how their respective home states are contributing to this effort. Some are offering finance and assistance exclusively through international financial institutions, while other states are channeling assistance to specific targets, or what one could describe as twinned communities. In short, Ukraine will be the biggest construction site in Europe. Ukraine is an EU candidate state on the threshold of opening your EU negotiations to build on the existing association and deep and comprehensive free trade agreements. You have a chance, a real national opportunity to become, in my view, the EU's lead centre and pioneer in the greening of construction, a place where capacity and skills can be developed, exploited, and eventually used as a source of future national income and guidance and inspiration to others. Let me turn to the second part of my remarks today to share with you an emerging vision for the future of the greening of Europe's construction. Currently, I have the privilege to chair a working group of leading construction industry experts on the greening of transport infrastructure construction for the European Commission. This is done through DG Move, which is like the transport ministry of the European Commission in Brussels. We will publish our preliminary report at EU 10T days. These are the days about the trans-European transport networks, and that publication will be in Brussels early next month. And the report to which I refer will be available on the DG Move website. Let me share with you, if I could, some of our insights from that work. But please, Anastasia, I ask you one thing, and the colleagues listening, do not publish in advance what I'm telling you, because in fact, I'm ahead of the publication, but you are a perfect audience to share some of this with. As you know, the EU aims to be climate neutral by 2050, to have an economy with net zero greenhouse gas emissions. This objective is at the heart of the European Green Deal, and it is legally binding thanks to the European Climate Law. In Europe, building and construction sector accounts for approximately 40% of Europe's energy consumption and 36% of Europe's greenhouse gas emissions. This mainly comes from construction, usage, renovation, and demolition. It is estimated that between a fifth and a quarter of the life cycle emissions of the current EU building stock are embedded in construction materials. In other words, what you're building with already builds in a big slice from the beginning of what the CO2 dimensions of construction come to. According to Eurostat, which is the EU's statistics agency, construction and demolition waste accounted for as much as 37.5% of total waste generated in 2020. Concerning EU, I would suggest that you would take note of what is called the greenhouse gas mitigation hierarchy. This suggests effective actions and strategies to mitigate climate change in construction. The model has 4 main steps, often shown as a pyramid. The first and preferred step in the hierarchy is to avoid projects that would result in greenhouse gas emissions altogether. So the first question, can we avoid? But of course, with your reconstruction program, the answer is no. That is an urgent necessity. The next step is to minimize emissions as much as possible by limiting the size of the project or the resources and type of resources that it uses. The third step involves restoring or enhancing natural systems that can sequester or absorb greenhouse gases. And the final steps in the hierarchy are to compensate and neutralize any remaining emissions. So that hierarchy is a conceptual framework. A recent joint manifesto published by the European International Contractors, EIC, and the European Construction Industry Federation, FIEC, and the EU Network of Construction Companies, ENCORD, ENCORD, advocates a shift from the linear to a circular business model to drastically reduce waste production and raw material consumption. This is called the cradle to cradle principle, and it aims to create a closed loop system in which materials are reused and waste is eliminated. The aim over time is that 90% of primary resources will need to be reused. The life cycle of any construction project in this model, indeed in any construction, has 4 phases: a design phase, a construction phase, an operation and maintenance phase, and at the end of life, perhaps a deconstruction or recycling phase. Traditionally, as you know, these phases are relatively independent from one another. It means they're dealt with by different actors, such as designers, architects, contractors, infrastructure companies, demolition companies, waste companies, and so on. There's a need to move away from traditional linear working methods to develop a circular economy life cycle approach. And this suggests a need for more collaborative approaches among all the key players at the earliest stage in the project life cycle. Each new construction should be reconsidered according to its overall environmental cost-benefit ratio, consequently designed, constructed, maintained, rebuilt, dismantled, and recycled, reducing its environmental impact with a constant focus on emissions, natural resources, and primary energy consumption. The first phase of the project life cycle, materials production, selection, and design, constitutes the most important stage for the decarbonisation of construction. The design phase serves as a critical juncture for limiting the size or scoping the size of the project, for deciding the consumption of materials, for fostering innovation in design, and for enabling the exploration of alternative approaches. It includes, for instance, the possibility to preserve or repurpose existing assets, to develop adaptive design or modular design strategies. By prioritizing circular economy in the design phase, engineers and architects have a crucial role to play to set the foundation for environmentally responsible and resilient structures and infrastructures. Designers have the possibility to further limit carbon intensity by working with circular methods. For example, by using more locally sourced materials, as well as the reuse of materials, components, and structural elements extracted from the deconstruction and demolition of existing structures. Another pivotal strategy involves the choice of materials and substituting traditional materials with low carbon alternatives. For example, concrete and steel needs are identified and commonly selected in the design phase. It is possible to reduce the carbon intensity of such widely used materials by carefully selecting low emission products. To give you an example, for concrete, decarbonisation measures relate to the utilisation of low clinker cements, already specified in European norms. Since 2023, new technologies for innovative low carbon cement and concrete have been implemented. These products are fully fit for infrastructure and for structural construction and renovation. And they show carbon reduction potentials significantly above 50%. So one big material choice and design can have a huge individual impact on CO2 emissions. Reducing emissions during the construction phase stands out as another key step. The two main areas of intervention to reduce construction phase emissions are related to on-site activities. Rapid construction methods is one way. It's a promising avenue for expediting project timelines and a way of curbing spillover emissions. So minimizing construction duration can have a positive impact on lowering emissions. But the other thing is on the site itself, which machinery you're going to use, and in particular, to try to use now available on the market hybrid and fully electric on-site machines and track machines. On-site machinery powered by renewable energy sources, whether that's hydro-treated vegetable oil, electricity, or hydrogen, produce little or no emissions. And so by eliminating or minimizing these, again, it helps to reduce carbon footprint. Another big thing is looking at the local supply chain for raw materials and developing efficient on-site production processes. I would put a strong emphasis on the recycling of materials and what the construction people describe to me as urban mining, looking in the local region or municipal environment for the recycling possibilities that help to reduce eventual emissions. What I want to say finally is, from this meeting I've had, I'm not the expert, but I've met the experts and I'm conveying to you some of what I've learned. Potentially, I think an important greening element in Ukraine relates to dismantling and recycling. Reusing materials on site or employing recycled materials in construction not only minimizes environmental impact, but it conserves valuable resources. One of the things as you design new projects is also thinking about the end of life phase, so that deconstruction is privileged instead of demolition. And deconstruction allows for dismantling of salvaged materials, and this then, of course, reduces the overall footprint. I want, in finishing this dimension of my remarks, to mention one important thing, which is the role of public procurement policy. This can have a strong steering effect in the construction sector, and it's a powerful tool to incentivize a shift to low carbon construction projects. The EU procurement rules already provide for the possibility for project promoters to select contractors based on sustainability criteria. But this is not yet a well-developed or mature system. And I think between EU and Ukraine, a thing you should work on, that we should work on, is developing the specifications for a new European green construction procurement policy, where you in Ukraine, because of your needs, can be the leading edge. The effect of decarbonisation obligations depends on their transferability from public regulation into actual contracts. And one of the areas which is weak is the nature of contractual law in tenders for specifying precisely what the climate target should be. This is something we are inventing, but let's invent it and let's deploy it on what will be Europe's biggest building site which is Ukraine, so that you win, and because of what you do, we win also by learning. And last but not least, as was remarked earlier, is the capacity question, the skills challenge, the teaching of professionals, researchers, apprentices, construction workers in state-of-the-art knowledge. This needs investment in education and training initiatives to help individuals at every stage of the process, design, construction, operation and maintenance, deconstruction and recycling, to make environmentally conscious decisions. And this is by no means an issue for Ukraine. This is a universal issue. But again, I stress, with the scale of your needs, you Ukrainians could become for yourselves and for us in Europe, and through that, a European and global leader in this field. And of course, public authorities need upskilling to design and manage the green construction tenders and contracts of tomorrow. So Anastasia and my dear friends, to conclude, the next topic on your agenda today is green finance. Under the EU Taxonomy, green finance will follow and invest in green construction. I believe you in Ukraine have a once-in-a-generation challenge at the end of this war to be not only Europe's biggest construction site, unhappily due to the war, but also to have the opportunity with intelligent, strategic planning, training, and upskilling, also to become Europe's test bed and leading exponent of a shift from the linear to a circular construction business model. The European Ukrainian Energy Agency and all your partners today can both be advocates for and agents of this transition to the benefit of Ukraine and to the betterment of the wider EU. My invitation to you, my Ukrainian friends, is to seize this opportunity and by this means to continue showing and giving leadership in peace as you're now doing in war. Thank you for your invitation. Thank you for your attention. Slava Ukraini.